Howdy everyone, and welcome to the cerealgeekTV YouTube channel. My name is James Eatock, and today I present to you something special. Last year I featured a lengthy 6-part interview with storyboard artist and writer Robert Lamb. I've known Rob since 1998 and he's always spoken very highly of the Filmation storyboard department, especially Vic Dal Chele, who was also the best man at Rob's wedding. Vic Dal Chele has worked in the animation industry from 1981 until, well, today. He's worked at Filmation, Marvel Productions, Geek, Hanna-Barbera, Warner Brothers, Disney, the list goes on. I've known Vic for over a decade now and he's an incredibly humble gentleman. I thought it would be fascinating for fans of this channel and animation in general to hear Vic talk about his time in the industry. This is the 6th part of the interview. Enjoy.
Now that I've experienced working at other studios like Marvel and DC, and upon returning to Filmation, I began to really appreciate the working environment there. The feeling of being a part of a creative community that did all the work in one place, not just the writing and storyboards and designs, but all the art for the actual production of every bit of animation of every character, to painting thousands of cells and shooting them under the camera. Everybody working under one roof, well, actually 2 roofs, since we all know the pictures, we've all seen the pictures of the old Filmation building, but diagonally from that one across the street was another office building that contained the layout department and a lot of the animation crews. It really was a wonderful place. It really was. Full of so many talented and creative people. And for many of us, it was where we learned our craft. Whether it was animation, storyboarding, writing, directing. And every new young artist seemed to have at least one older, experienced mentor to guide them. I mean, if a place like that still exists, I haven't heard of it in 20 years or more. I'm sorry to say, in my capacity as storyboard artist and story department supervisor, I'm surprised at how little I got to work directly with Lou Scheimer. For the most part, I would see Lou almost every day of the week in dailies. That dailies is a review where we look at the footage that was shot the previous day and make comments. All of the department heads would be in that meeting in that room, and so there would be like 20 plus people there. And that was the only regular meeting I ever took with Lou. But I gotta tell you, Lou was a great boss to have. He really influenced the entire studio and really treated us all like we were extended members of his family. I know we were young and we wanted to make changes and do all things better. And we really, well, some of us absolutely hated the stock system. Some of us grudgingly tolerated it. I was in the latter camp. But everybody wanted to make great cartoons, and so even though in hindsight it was a wonderful place to work, while we were there, we were always sort of a little annoyed that things couldn't be done better. But it didn't take long after Filmation closed for us Filmation veterans to realize, because of being exposed to other studios, that we had no idea how well we had it at Filmation. We knew it was good, but it was so much more than that. I think one thing that people nowadays, even people that are in the animation, don't realize is that Filmation had hundreds of artists working there. Not dozens, like the studios today, but maybe 50 or 60 are in the studios today. But usually, each production has 24 to 30 people on it because of doing all the work in the United States. Filmation had hundreds of people working there. So many of them that were extremely talented and such personalities. Well, I guess I have to say, that the majority of the artists that were working at Filmation at the time were very, very excited about working on BraveStarr. I mean, the development artwork for the series that we saw was very inspiring. It had a real solid look about it, and the writing by Bob Ford and the artwork by Gerald Fortin was a cut above anything done by the studio. Really. We were also excited about this space western, which I think at the time was a pretty new concept to the world in general. During my time as storyboard department supervisor, there was a real creative struggle going on inside the studio. It seemed like everyone, including myself, didn't care for the stock and same-as system. But I was in a group that tolerated it because the benefits of using the system kept everybody employed. It helped to reduce the cost so that Filmation could produce competitively priced shows equal to the other studios in Hollywood. Unfortunately, there were a lot of people who resented it and challenged it. And the storyboard department was where the stock and same-as system was implemented for the rest of the studio to follow. So unfortunately, and because of this, the people who wanted to do away with the stock and same-as system complained about the storyboards. And by the time we began working on BraveStarr, the studio's confidence in the storyboard department was at a low point. And I thought I was going to be fired because the complaints from the directors and others about the quality of the boards had become so contentious. Eventually, sometime after the move to the Canoga Park studio was done, I was demoted to staff board artist. I was replaced as board supervisor by Gary Goldstein, a great artist and a great, wonderful guy, gentleman, real gentleman. And I think they brought Bob Barkwright back to help to stabilize the situation, the transition. It wasn't an easy thing for me. And Gary made my transition with kindness and compassion. And speaking of kindness, I remember being told that the person blocking my complete firing was Lou Scheimer himself. They compromised with him, calling for my demotion. This is just another example of the countless reasons why so many admired and cared for Lou. Okay, on BraveStarr, I did my job, worked in the bullpen with all the board artists, and for the most part, they were the same crew that worked with me on She-Ra and Filmation's Ghostbusters. I felt a real kinship towards them, even the ones that were a bit of a pain in the behind. I wanted to do something to show my appreciation, and decided to do caricatures of each of them as cast members from BraveStarr. And it was quite a lineup. Looking from left to right, the first fellow is the wonderful and taciturn Brian Chin, wonderful artist and great raconteur. Brian did a spot-on impersonation of Eliot Ness, or rather the actor Robert Stack. I remember doing a special sketch of Brian as Eliot Ness. The next person is Camilla Clark. Camilla was one of the production staff who was hired to assemble the same-as system. Cam would slice up the pre-selected board panels and paste them up into the same-as master files. Those files really did become volumes, 5 volumes by the time we were doing BraveStarr. The next person is Paul Scarzo. I made him a little taller to fit his personality. Paul was of Italian and Japanese ancestry, talented, and he was very entrepreneurial. Next is Hannah Strauss, a New Yorker through and through. She was an avid bicyclist, and Hannah traveled everywhere in Los Angeles on her bike. And to fit her personality, I made sure she had a shotgun, a rifle, and a pistol. Next is Dave Prince. He was a bit of a surfer dude, maybe, I'm not sure, but he was very laid back and unflappable, very talented. Then there is Flamarion Ferreira. His family was from Argentina, so that's why he's in the gaucho gear. Next to him is Bob Arkwright. He was the co-storyboard supervisor or board supervisor, depending on what show. Next to him, a really talented young Mike Cisnowski. Mike was a participant in our rubber bullet battles. Then there's Dory Littell Herrick, who was in charge of a lot of things, but mainly of assembling the stock and same as system and getting it out to everyone. She's a very talented artist as well, and has had a long career in animation. Next is my old buddy Rob Lamb. At this point, he worked alongside Dory. Then there's another assistant, Lisa, and God bless her, I don't remember her last name. Then there's myself, and Gary Goldstein, or Goldstein, depending on what side of the Mississippi River you're living on. Next is one of my good buddies, Carl Tord. Carl was crazy, and he might still be, and he was just full of energy and enthusiasm. He was also a rubber bullet battle veteran. Next to Carl is another battle veteran, Al Zegler. Al went on to do some great things at Warner's. He was one of the directors on Tiny Toons. I remember he directed one of my favorite episodes called Potty Emergency. So full of sight gags and creativity. It was just a hilarious episode. He was just a wonderful fellow. And next to him is Rachel Brenner. And she certainly had great abilities as a board artist. And also she was a bit of a gymnast. Then there's Ichi Chin, who was one of the stronger draftsmen, really talented. Ichi was an inspiration to all the artists on staff. Ichi, I believe, storyboarded the majority of the BraveStarr title sequence. My only contribution to it was the 30-30 and BraveStarr when they turn to each other and wink. Next to last is Chris Jenkins, a bit of an elderly statesman for storyboards of the storyboard department, but a solid guy, solid delivery, never missed a deadline, and a lot of fun. Last but not least is Glenn Hill, a really solid storyteller with strong abilities. Glenn went on to do some directing as well, shows like Fantastic Four and Iron Man and other Saturday morning shows. One other positive thing that happened during BraveStarr was that I approached Arthur Nadell, the head of the story department. I recall he was complaining that the writers weren't being as creative as he was hoping they would be on this new sci-fi western. He was getting a lot of reworked plots from many other series, especially reworked scripts from Filmation shows. I pitched him a few of my ideas for a BraveStarr episode, and luckily Arthur accepted one of my premises, and I actually got to write an episode of BraveStarr entitled Hostage. When I turned the script in, Arthur really took a liking to it, because I had formulated a plot that none of the other writers had come up with. I recall being told about a meeting Arthur had with staff writers to praise the work that I had done, and so much so, in fact, that I think I counted at least 5 episodes where my story structure was adapted and used in the subsequent scripts for the series. In addition to the positive praise of my script received from Arthur Nadell, the real icing on the cake was that I was given the script to storyboard. That was a real thrill to do. I guess you could call it the Filmation equivalent of written and directed by. Another thing I remember working on as a board artist during the run of BraveStarr was a 2-part sort of pilot for a new proposed series based on Sherlock Holmes. That was a fun departure, and it was a blast to storyboard. I just love Sherlock Holmes. You know, I was thrilled to be part of the storyboard crew for that 2-episode pilot. Now, after BraveStarr, we began to work on another spin-off series called, based on the Prairie People, called, I think it was called Bravo, or Quest of the Prairie People, or maybe it was Bravo Quest for the Prairie People. Anyway, I believe it was a 65-episode order. And I don't remember actually ever finishing a storyboard for the series. But this was right at the time where I was actively looking for a career change, you know, looking to leave Filmation. So I left about a year before they closed. And at the time they closed, I know they had gotten a lot of the Bravo series through production. Also, they had started on another one called Bugsburg, which I think was inspired by a sequence in Filmation's version of Pinocchio. Anyway, they had just gotten that started when the studio closed. The Filmation closing was like an earthquake happened in the industry. It really was a shockwave that hit everyone at every studio. It was just terrible, terrible news. Now, I have some insight and theories on what led to the end of the studio, the end of the Filmation. And that Filmation was a victim of its own success in He-Man. You see, He-Man was an unparalleled monster of a hit. It was a phenomenon. He-Man was on roughly 300 stations daily across the United States, each giving Filmation the revenue from 2 minutes of advertising per day. So Filmation received daily the income from approximately 600 minutes of advertising, and many of those stations, in major markets at least, showed He-Man twice a day. The revenue from He-Man was, at that point, unmatched by any syndicated show in history. Westinghouse, the parent company owners of Filmation, had brought Filmation years back as part of a package acquisition that they virtually ignored Filmation. But suddenly, this sleepy little animation company had the attention of a huge multinational corporation. All the money that they were raking in, now this corporation took notice. In the eyes of most all corporations, if you make X amount of profit 1 year, then the next year you not only have to match that profit, but increase that profit. If not, there's something wrong. Every series that Filmation created after He-Man was a financial success. But the problem was that if you're lucky, you can repeat success after success. But you can't expect to repeat a phenomenon after phenomenon. Westinghouse bean counters didn't understand that concept. So what really helped accelerate Filmation's demise was the success of He-Man. At the end of one series, I think it was She-Ra, but it could have been Ghostbusters. The cost of each episode was substantially over what was budgeted. I recall that it averaged out to be about $45,000 more per episode than what was budgeted. And that's 65 episodes. So that would be about $2.9 million over budget in 1987 dollars. That equals about $7.5 to $8 million today. Well, this did not make the parent company Westinghouse happy. What happened was that Westinghouse got together with the head of production and they said, okay, fine, let's adjust the budgets for the next show so that we increase them by $45,000 or $50,000 an episode. And then you should be able to make your budgets and not be so far over budget. And the next series, which I believe was BraveStarr, they were way over budget from what was augmented. It should have been not over budget at all, but they were almost as much over budget as that previous series. And when that happened, I think that's when Westinghouse started to find a way to close the studio or to sell the studio. And unfortunately sold to a predatory corporation who wasn't after anything but the library. They wanted the library. 25 years of animated shows that Filmation had part ownership in or full ownership in, depending on the series. So that's my view of what led to the studio closing. After Filmation, I went to DIC and did a number of shows, and I think we pretty much covered those already. But the last thing I did at DIC was about 1988. I was doing art direction and storyboard supervising on the Karate Kid series. This was the first time of many times that I worked directly with the legendary Larry Houston. We'd been working, like at Marvel, on the same projects, but we weren't working together. We were separate. This is the first time we worked together. After DIC, I went to Fox Children's Television as a board artist on their flagship series, Peter Pan and the Pirates. I don't know if anybody remembers that one. And that production is a long, long story in and of itself, but I'm not really going to get into that kind of nitty-gritty. I'm just trying to list some of the shows that I did. Then I started a longish job as a board artist at Rich Entertainment, a small company of ex-Disney staffers that did religious animated videos, like the New Testament and the Old Testament, and a series of American heroes like George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Benjamin Franklin, etc. All in all, I storyboarded about 16 titles or episodes of those series at Rich Entertainment. After that, I did some work at a company called Gunther Wall on a sort of obscure miniseries for Fox Children's Television based on Robert Heinlein's story Red Planet. That was followed by a one-shot for Tasmania, then back to Gunther Wall for the series Wild West Cowboys of Moo Mesa and a series called T-Rex. Then one of the great experiences that I've ever had was getting to work as a story artist with one of the best producers I've ever worked for, Davis Doi at Hanna-Barbera. I worked on a primetime series called Capital Critters. Later, I went on to work with Davis as a storyboard supervisor on another Hanna-Barbera show called SWAT Cats. And SWAT Cats for me was a great series because it broke that Hanna-Barbera mold. I mean, it really broke through. People didn't think Hanna-Barbera did it. Then after SWAT Cats, I went on to a short freelance job on a series called Mighty Max at Film Roman. And after that, I was doing boards for Tom T on Biker Mice from Mars. I think it was the first series or first season. Then after that, back to Hanna-Barbera in 1994 for a TV feature titled Johnny Quest versus the Cyber Insects. And that was a thrill. Johnny Quest was one of my favorites as a kid. In the years that followed, I found that I often became part of a crew that was brought in to salvage an animated series that had been mismanaged or found itself in a great deal of trouble. The strange thing was that after a number of times I experienced that, what I found really confusing was that often the person responsible for the mismanaging of the series would be hired in the same position the following season. Probably in another studio, but still the same position. And it was maddening that I found myself following after these disastrous producers and getting their show back on track. I mean, wow. I really was frustrated. After being part of a crew that successfully saved the series many times, I felt that if you can take a show that's been wrecked and fix it, you should be great at taking a show from the beginning and producing a successful series. Then around the end of 93, 94, I tried to start my own company with some friends. Al Zegler, Nick Dubois, Butch Lukic, Lance Falk, and others. We teamed up with Image Comic owner-creator Rob Liefeld to do a 3-minute pilot for his Youngblood comic to sell as a Saturday morning series.
Attention, Youngblood team. Stand by for drop. Go, Die Hard, Chapel, Vogue and Shaft, Bad Rock, Riptide and Sentinel.
Although we came close, we didn't get the series. But it did lead to Will Mineo realizing that I had the potential to be a showrunner. So Will got me a gig on Exo Squad at Universal Cartoons as an art director, while they were grooming me for my first producer-director gig, which came a little bit later. And that was for Groz Entertainment for the CBS Saturday morning series entitled Skeleton Warriors. Skeleton Warriors was one of the first, if not the first, Saturday morning show that had parts of it done with computer animation. I know that we've become accustomed these days with computer animation, but character animation in the early to mid 90s was very cost prohibitive. I mean, especially with a Saturday morning budget. I mean, the ability to change expressions on characters was unheard of at that time. And some people would have probably say it was impossible to do that. But the ability to use what was called morph targets to do facial animation and dialogue was kind of really developed for the Skeleton Warriors series. I also worked on other shows that Groz produced at that time, like G.I. Joe Extreme, Street Fighter, and best of all, 2 episodes of X-Men that I am very proud to have done. One was entitled A Rogue's Tale, and the other was Mojo Vision. Also, around that time, I did some freelance for Disney Television on the Gargoyle series. Following that, I went to MGM Animation for the first time as a storyboard artist on an animated direct-to-video feature called Babes in Toyland. After that, I was back at Marvel Animation, but this time it was a separate unit formed to produce the Spider-Man animated series for Fox Kids TV in the mid-90s. I left Spider-Man at the end of 95 because Davis Doy and Larry Houston needed a storyboard supervisor for The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest, and I couldn't turn down working with 2 of the best that I've ever worked with. After Johnny Quest, at Hanna-Barbera, which was about 1997, came Columbia TriStar Television. I was a supervising director on about 15 of the 40 episodes of the series Extreme Ghostbusters for producer Audie Hayden. After Extreme Ghostbusters, it was back to Hanna-Barbera, working on Scooby-Doo and The Witch of Salem. A lot of animation companies were producing featurettes or direct-to-video features at that time. And that was one of I think it was the second one for Scooby-Doo. The first one was Zombie Island. I wish I would have worked on that, but unfortunately I was busy with other things. Then back to MGM for All Dogs Christmas. Then I was storyboard artist on Tom Sawyer, another MGM direct-to-video feature. And I stayed on at MGM Animation to be a producer-director on RoboCop, Alpha Commando, along with my friend Larry Houston. So after MGM and RoboCop, I found myself back with Davis Doy, working at Warner Animation, formerly Hanna-Barbera, on the Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders, another direct-to-video feature. So there's a lot of direct-to-video features at this time. The next thing I worked on was a primetime series called God, the Devil, and Bob. It really was a wonderful experience working with good friends Dan Fawcett and Clint Taylor, among others. It starred one of my heroes, though, one of my other heroes besides Pierce Brosnan, James Garner. Great artists, Rockford Files, Maverick, etc. And James Garner played the title character, God. Unfortunately, the show was boycotted by the born-again community, and it was dropped from NBC after 4 episodes because the commercial sponsors were afraid of the boycott and pulled their commercials from the show. After that experience, I did a short stint as a board artist on the Wild Thornberrys. Then, out of the blue, I got a call to go to Mike Young Productions as an animation director on the new CGI series called The But Ugly Martians. Now, that took about a year. It was a good gig, and that took me through 2001. Then after that, it was back to Columbia TriStar for some Max Steel as a board artist. That was another CGI series. After Max Steel, I was back at Mike Young to board on their version of He-Man. I was the only original He-Man board artist to work on this incarnation. Then in 2002, there was Baby Looney Tunes and some work on the animated Ozzy and Drix series. Shortly after that, I was offered the job to be one of the directors on the 3rd season of Static Shock. And that was a real honor. I mean, it really was, to work with Swinton Scott and Dennis Cowan and Alan Burnett and the legendary Dwayne McDuffie. The 3rd season of Static was supposed to be the final season, but the crew on season 3 did so well that the audience grew too large to be ignored. So instead of canceling the series, they greenlit a 4th season of Static Shock. And that I'm really, really proud to have been part of. After Static Shock, I was doing freelance boards on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for that incarnation of around 2002-2003. I also became a staff board artist at Warner Brothers on Ozzy and Drix, and then another season of Ninja Turtles after that. A few boards for Tom T on the series Legend of the Dragon, and also a board revisionist on the series Mucha Lucha at Warner Brothers as well. Around that time, the guys that used to run MGM Animation started their own company, and they called on me and asked me to come to direct for them. So I did 3 direct-to-video features of My Little Pony. I broke off and tried to start my own animation company again with some other partners, one being Steve Gold. After years of pursuit and negotiations, we had gotten the rights to do Robert E. Howard's Conan, and we started producing in 2005. We had the most amazing crew of friends and respected colleagues on that project who did some of their best work for that project. I stuck with Red Nails from 2005 until 2008. It's a very long story, but it didn't see the light of day. I did some work for Tom T on another generation of Biker Mice from Mars, and also a series called Zorro Generation Z. Then shows like Care Bears, Marvel Superhero Squad, Avengers, Strawberry Shortcake, a Lego miniseries called Hero Factory was next. After that, around that time, I was tapped to direct about 60 web episodes of Mattel's Monster High. Those were a lot of fun to do, and I was reunited with Audu Payton, my producer on Extreme Ghostbusters. Then it was back to Marvel to work on the first 2 seasons of Hulk and the Agents of Smash with my buddies Dan Fawcett, Clint Taylor, Patrick Archibald, and Mitch Schauer. All great guys and fantastic artists. And after that, I did about 3 or 4 episodes of the series Transformers Rescue Bots. And then another Lego project. This time it was Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. That was a hoot to do. I really enjoyed working on that one. Then I found myself on the first 2 seasons, I think, of a show for the Asian market primarily called Vault the Wonder Year. Back working again with Dan Fawcett and Ron Myrick. Then the last few shows that I've worked on before COVID, the writer's strike, the director's strike, and the bottom falling out of the animation industry were a Netflix series called Q-Force and an independent, wonderful fantasy series called The Wingfeather Saga. So there, I think we reached the end. You know, you can see that in an animation career, there are some really very positive ups, but there are also some very devastating, sometimes devastating downs. But there are ups and downs. And I haven't described all of the negative things, but I've tried to balance out what a career in animation looks like. I've had a great career and I've had ups and downs, but it's been a great experience. I got to raise a family, had 3 kids and, grandkids now. So it is a good career. If you are lucky enough and persevere, you might achieve your goals. So keep trying and don't give up. Hey James, I hope this doesn't cause a continuity or too much of a continuity problem, but got the same shirt, but I lost my glasses, so these are my backups. I can't find my glasses. Maybe nobody will notice. Probably that's what's going to happen. So we'll see. So here goes take 1.